What's up, and welcome back. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com, and you made the right choice. You clicked on this review. Pat yourself on the back. Today we're going to talk about Presence. I'm a blind film critic, and Presence does have audio description. It's produced by International Digital Center, written by Liz Gutman, and narrated by Frankie Corzo. So you can check this movie out. It's a neon release. So likely at some point it'll be on Hulu. But when? But when? That's the question. So it's directed by Steven Spielberg. Steven Soderbergh. I'm keeping that in there. Steven Spielberg would have made a better movie. I'm sorry. Steven Soderbergh likes to make films that are interesting directorial efforts, but not necessarily interesting films. He had like an entire film that he shot on an iPhone. So it's not necessarily recognized for being his best work, but I mean, he achieved it. He did it. So it's almost like he can make films super cheap. And so he does it so that he can say, well, I did that. I did, I conquered this off my bucket list of achievements. He interestingly makes artistic choices, and then also turns around and makes like commercially viable films like the Ocean's franchise or Aaron Brockovich. So I mean, his style is all over the place. He's a very accessible director, but at the same time, he's also a very artistic director. He's whatever he wants to be given the project at the time. Which kind of makes it interesting because you don't know if you're going to get the commercial version of him or if you're going to get the auteur version of Soderbergh. This is a little bit of both in some regards. By the way, for my blind and low vision viewers, I'm trying to remember to do this more. I've got a purple baseball cap on backwards, and New York Yankees baseball cap, black sunglasses. I'm wearing a Loki shirt, like from Marvel. It's a green t-shirt, and just kind of sitting in a chair. And I have a beard, by the way. I'm white. I think those are all the defining characteristics. I think you have a better idea of what I look like. Anyway, Presence. You will not know what the Presence looks like in Presence. This film stars Lucy Liu and Chris Sullivan, who are the parents. They have two teenage kids, and they have moved to this new house. There's a hint that the daughter has gone through a tragic moment where I think she lost one of her friends, and she's dealing with grief, and the son is neurodivergent. I think that's the word we're using now, and on the spectrum of some kind, although, I mean, he barely comes across like that. It's not a very, I don't know that the actor is. I don't know that Soderbergh does enough to support that, those choices, but this is a very odd film. This is a very weird film, and critics are loving it, and I'm not 100% sure why. I appreciate the effort. I appreciate the ingenuity and the choice in storytelling. And I think as an experiment, it certainly is an interesting film. Do I think it's a great film? No, I don't. And what it feels like to me is sort of my complaint that I had about here is that when you choose to have a very specific perspective, the whole movie, it becomes very hard to string through a very pretty, clear-cut narrative, which here feels like somehow it has. Even though it jumps through time, you kind of see, at least for the primary narrative, you're seeing all of these moments, and yet the camera is supposedly focused on this one specific location, this one spot, the whole movie that people keep walking into. And it's like, well, think about any corner in your house and think about how many times you go into that corner of your house. Do you do a lot of conversations there? Do you have a lot of major moments in that one corner? And then do you think, like, historically over the course of centuries, over millennia, that a lot of things have happened in that corner, or where that corner would be if there was land. So it's like, it's an interesting premise, but you almost have to deconstruct the film to where it doesn't have a plot, so that way we can accept what it is, accept your film for what it is, because or make it a broader shot and give us a shot of the dining room or something, and then it's just conversations of people always moving in and out of the dining room, and forget the time traveling aspect of it, right? And then just focus on the one family. But I think he's just a little bit too ambitious, Zemeckis, with here. And I think Soderbergh is doing that here with Presence. Presence is arguably the lead of the film is somebody you're not going to see, because that's the presence, which is you. It's a great VR movie, by the way. If you're sighted and you have an opportunity to watch this on like an Oculus, I would absolutely do that. I would think this would be a killer movie to watch with a VR headset on, or where you're like, oh my god, it's me and I'm living the movie. It's because that's what it's intended to feel like. That's the gimmick of Presence, is that it's like Nickel Boys. It's shot in first person perspective. The presence is the camera. So this new family moves into this house that has a presence in it. They're like a ghost. It's not really like a ghost story. It's in a horror movie. The walls will not start bleeding at some point during this movie. So this is not a Blumhouse production. I know it can get a little sketchy when you hear that Neon's releasing it, but I think Neon's releasing it because they're, much like A24, they try to take artistic swings. So I think they picked this up because it's an artistic swing. And the presence is going to follow the kids through the house and the parents, but it seems to always meticulously be able to find the right conversations and the right times. And this is one of those films where I think it would have benefited from happening in real time, more so than the way that it happens, because we end up getting these, like, it like blacks out, but we never get to explain why we're blacking out, why we're cutting. Why is the ghost cutting? Why are we cutting the footage of this presence? Like, it's an interesting stylistic choice. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think it's really cool that we're taking it from the perspective of the ghost, but then we have no other perspective changes. See, Nickel Boys swaps between the two boys, and so suddenly your perspective changes to one of the two leads, and that's how it can tell. It can move the camera through certain things. No, this one kind of cuts from scene to scene, as if a normal movie would, but yet the understanding is that the camera is his presence. So you're kind of just moving through and managing to show up at all the right times to tell what is a very convenient narrative, edited together from this ghost. So it kind of betrays its own premise. So I'm saying, like, I think the film would have been better if it was told in real time, almost in like a continuous shot, or made to feel like a continuous shot, like 1917. I think that would have benefited the film a lot more. It would have made it a little bit harder to sell ultimately what is the end of the film, but the end of the film doesn't really work for me anyway. So I would have no love lost there. I think it's better to show this family moving in, and they're going through stuff, and they think that this move is going to help them, but maybe it doesn't. And maybe that's all the presence needs to witness. I don't think the presence needs to witness what happens in the third act. I don't think that's necessary. I think Soderbergh overshoots it here, by both narratively and also literally by using his presence as a camera more than as a character. So instead of being able to create what feels like a character, we have a ghost that just blacks out, I guess. But because we can't talk to the presence and the presence has nobody to talk to, we don't actually know why it's blacking out or where we're going. It just kind of feels like a camera cut instead. So because you can't explain it, because there's no way to actually explain what's happening with the presence, there's no way to actually make what Soderbergh is doing make sense. So um I like it's tough because it's like you want I want to like this. I do. Like it seems like most critics have been like all over this movie and like wow, this is but at the same time I'm like, where how is this I don't get it. I don't get how this is other than looking at it as an achievement. But there are so many people who are turned off by Nickel Boys being in first person perspective that I'm like, how is this not turning you off? I thought Nickel Boys was a stronger film, and there was a reason for you to be in that perspective because you're you were still experiencing things. The presence doesn't really experience things; it just kind of witnesses things, like a camera does. So if you're going to make it feel more like a presence, other than trying to like float the camera, you have to do a little bit more than this to create a character, you know, to create it and make it feel like that there's a character here that is that their perspective is being seen through the camera. So it doesn't help. The passages in here don't help that because it's a character we can't talk to. It's a character that can't talk to anybody else. So it can't really explain what's happening to it. There is sort of like a medium person who comes in and tries to explain that time moves differently for the presence, and the presence doesn't even really know why it's here, and it's confused. But we don't know if that person's actually like truthful or not, you know? I was expecting more out of that scene other than her to just sort of be generally like surprised. It just depends on, I think that scene affects you too more, like depending on how much you believe in mediums. So the more you believe in a medium, the better off you are. It's an interesting movie. I'm not gonna say it's not. And I was engaged to sit through this simply because it was interesting. I'm seeing a lot of films now that are maybe not great, but they're interesting. Like directors are making interesting choices. And to me, that is somehow rewarding to watch the choices being made. It's far more interesting to me to watch a movie that didn't work, but a director is making interesting choices. And it's sort of like unique choices instead of just like an incredibly derivative film that means nothing and has nothing to say and feels like 100 other films that came before it and is literally like a cookie cutter right off of the assembly line film, and yet somehow has completely failed to follow the formula set forth before by all of the other films. So films like that are offensively dull, and those are the films that I hate. But when I see stuff like Joker Folie à Deux, Megalopolis, here, a Presence, and there was something else this year that didn't bore me. Was it Odessa? It was Odessa. Uh, that are just sort of taking these big, sort of interesting choices and swings. Uh, I don't like the movies. I don't love the movies, but I like the experience of sitting here and watching these directors make these choices. So that's what I would say about Presence, is that I think at the end of the day, it becomes worth a watch if you're just sort of into like the craft of film, if you're just sort of into watching people make choices and interesting choices that directors don't typically make. And we can talk about all day long about how the choices didn't work and what the problems were with the film, but it's interesting to see somebody take so many big swings, and um, in a world where you could just be watching just the most generic uh, assembly line, streaming service releases that feel like the exact same thing that you just saw, or you could watch another horror movie that feels like something you saw last year, or it's just part of a trend. I mean, yeah, the movies were fine, but in the same year, we did have two movies about women who went off to try to join and become like a nun, and somehow both of them became pregnant in the same year, and both of them had demon babies within the same year. I mean, like having The First Omen and Immaculate in the same year within like a month of each other, it's hard to, at the same time, to be very excited about the uniqueness uh, of two very similar movies. So I felt the same way when Amazon had their package together, and they were packaging like two sports dramas for the Oscars. They were trying to send both The Fire Inside uh, and Unstoppable. And it's like, you guys are marketing, these are two very similar movies. um, and you're kind of taking the market on this specific genre at the Oscars, and they're coming from the same studio. Anyway, so like sometimes we just get caught up in the monotony of sameness, if I can use that word, sameness of repetitiveness. And Presence is not that. Presence is not repetitive. Even if you were to try to compare this to Nickel Boys and say, well, we had two first-person movies within like a month of each other, that's fair. They're very wildly different movies in genre, completely different genres. So there's something to be said for that as well. As far as the performances go, Lucy Liu she's come a long way as an actress. But I actually really enjoyed Chris Sullivan the most. I felt like, as a frustrated father, probably he grabbed the most attention for me out of the cast. I did like Lucy. I feel like, again, this is a little bit more mature performance from her. She's starting to get better roles. She's been acting long enough now that the kinds of roles and offers that she's getting, she, of course, notoriously, we remember from back in Charlie's Angels days, the spat that she had with Bill Murray, which caused him to not be invited back for the sequel, where he told her she couldn't act. And now she's still here, and she's doing a Steven Soderbergh movie. So there's that, she's managed to keep her career alive and going this whole time. But I don't know. Presence didn't 100% work for me. I love the audio description though. Like Liz's audio description, first person narrative audio description. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to do the we see and we float. You know what I'm saying? Like we look at, like to bring us in on that experience and remind us that we are the camera, that we are looking at these things. If we were to be able to see that it's through our eyes, it'd be very interesting if the presence was blind. And then the audio description exists for the sighted audience so that they can understand what it is that a blind ghost would see. But I guess the perspective is to remind us that no, you may not be able to see, but this ghost can. So, yeah. And I wouldn't say it's not a horror. It's definitely not a horror movie. I would actually qualify this as a drama. There are very few times that the ghost ever does anything ghostly or apparitionally, where it tries to reveal itself in any form. It mostly just is very passive and watches. This is not a scary movie. So if you've avoided Presence because you're like, oh, I think it's scary, you would have to have a really low threshold to be intimidated. Like if you tried to see like Brendan Fraser's The Mummy and like that was too much for you, then maybe Presence wouldn't work for you. Um, if Elephants on Parade from Dumbo still scares you as an adult, uh, maybe Presence is a bit much for you. But other than that, I think Presence is a pretty safe bet if you've been avoiding this because it's a horror movie. It's not a horror movie at all. There's nothing horrifying about it. It just happens to have a ghost. This is a lot more. This is like a ghost story, like the Casey Affleck movie, where yes, there's a ghost, but nobody would qualify that movie as horror. Nobody who's seen that movie would ever qualify it as horror. So, Presence. Oh, God. At the end of the day, I think the performances in here lift it a little bit. Soderbergh's interesting direction, style, and everything. The pace of the movie. There are a couple things here that lift it, but it's basically like the other films that I was talking about. It's like right in the middle for me, and it's in the coin toss area. Like for me, I'm thinking if I was ever on the tomato meter, when I give a movie a C, that's kind of my mid grade for me. That's like right in the middle, and that means I could go up or could go down depending on that. And that's kind of where I'm going with Presence. Um, I could go up or I could go down, and I could really go either way right now with this as to like a recommend or a not recommend. I don't quite get the hype around it as much. Um, Especially considering there are so many people who didn't like the first person perspective of Nickel Boys. I think it's a better movie. I think Nickel Boys is a much better movie. This does not quite use its first person perspective in a way that narratively strengthens the movie. It just sort of is a gimmick to get you in the seat. So um, that's it. I'm giving it a C. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you guys on the other side.